Hey, team players, welcome back. Today we're going to be discussing the Las Vegas Raiders and what they're going to do in the football field that obviously directly impacts fantasy football because it's a measurement of what they do on the field, right, Bob? Mm-hmm. So when we're talking about the Raiders, it's really a two-person conversation, but between Adams and Jacobs. But the entire question with this team is, what is it going to be like given the fact that they have a tremendously hard schedule? The fact that their offensive line is about as middle of the road as it could be, ranked 19th, and that they're changing their quarterbacks, their coaches on the hot seat, and they're going to be playing a very uphill battle a lot. To me, it makes the argument that give me the receiver who is by far the most talented player of all their receivers out there in Devonta Adams, who possibly is the most talented receiver in football, period, just based upon today's talent level. Adams certainly is in that conversation, if not the outright winner of it. But there's this whole notion that he should be somewhere around the 7th or 8th receiver off the board. And I got to tell you, I like Adams as a pure football player more than most of them. But we have this whole, what is this passing game going to be? Because we have seen the Raiders literally disappear for months at a time. And that's a thing. Mm-hmm. And when we look at the schedule that these guys are going to be playing, it's a possibility it's going to happen again. And, you know, when you have a history of the team imploding on head coaches turnover, say what you want about Gruden, but he at least stopped that problem. And there's a potential when you look at this schedule, they could reasonably start 0-6 before they go to Chicago. Like really, this team could be in some serious trouble without squinting too hard to see that. And do I want to take garbage time elite players, which Devonta Adams is, off of the Raiders when he's literally the only show in town? Or do I want to go to a more balanced team like CeeDee Lamb at the Cowboys? Because that's the debate you're going to be having between Adams and CeeDee. Do I want to look there knowing that he's not going to get quadruple covered every play? Because, again, Adams is the only receiving threat on this team, period.
So we did a video a couple weeks back about trying to figure out who I might take between Kelsey and Adams, because at that point in time, the rankings were pretty much the same. Mm-hmm. And we discussed how we thought that Jimmy Garoppolo wasn't a deep threat passer, and that would hurt Devonta Adams a little bit more. But as we did a little bit more research going into just the stats a little bit more and how Jimmy G operates, it's a common misnomer. It's a misconception that Jimmy G isn't a deep ball thrower. He can do it. It's just whether the team and the coaching staff wants him to do it, because mm-hmm. he can be prone to mistakes. But there has been 2 seasons where we've seen Jimmy G surpass the 20 touchdown mark. And during that time, he's passed for almost 3,800 yards, 3,900 yards. And during that time, his efficiency, especially going outside the numbers 2 players downfield, was not that bad. Mm-hmm. And you look at Devonta Adams last year, and you look at him the 2 years prior when he was at Green Bay, he has totaled 45 touchdowns in total over the last 3 seasons. And, you know, in each of those seasons, he's eclipsed over 100 catches. And, you know, he's been targeted 180 times the past 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. And
one of the most in the NFL.
One of the things that we would want to caution against with Devonta Adams is, like you said, it's not that he can't do it. It's not that, you know, we don't believe that he could do it, because of he's one of the most, if not the most talented wide receiver in football right now. It's just that you're taking Adams last year at one of his highest values. So 2020 mm-hmm. was his highest value, 133 receptions, 1,500 yards, 20 touchdowns. He is probably not going to get over 14 touchdowns again this year. And I say this because even though he's elite, the coverages that he's going to be facing, Jimmy G is going to have to thread the needle to him, and he can.
Mm-hmm.
But like we said, Jimmy G is prone to making mistakes.
Yeah,
And
so I guess this is the description we got to break down between Jimmy G and Carr. Jimmy G is much more likely to put it in the intermediate route and put it in there. He does not have the range of Carr. But the difference when we look at the average distance per pass is Carr does a whole lot more checkdowns because he was running for his life. And Jimmy G, when he was in San Francisco, didn't have that problem.
No, he had a pretty nice pocket the whole time. And I will say this, is that you've said that there's nobody else to pass to. Well, Jacoby Myers isn't necessarily a slouch in the NFL.
So not necessarily good either.
He's not necessarily good, but this is one of those things where last year they had Mac Hollins as a number 2 because
that was disgusting.
Renfro was hurt for most of the season. Jacoby Myers, I believe at least, is a tad bit better.
Oh, he's a mile better than Hollins.
Than Mac Hollins.
But that's not hard.
You also have Renfro coming back too. And here's the other thing too: is Josh Jacobs had his best season. He is well, their number 2 last year was Waller. Well, he was hurt.
Yeah.
So you look at this and you say, okay, well, are all the pieces there for Devonta Adams to succeed? Absolutely. However, you're taking him at his highest value. So there's a good chance that he will not surpass 14 touchdowns next year. More likely, maybe we'll settle in that 1,300 to 1,500 yards range with maybe about 9 to 10 touchdowns. Is that still what you want there? Absolutely. That's still a really good player. He probably has, his ceiling is 20 touchdowns. We saw it. It's there. Now, one of the things that you need to watch out for is if you're drafting Devonta Adams is you need Josh Jacobs to be back. If Josh Jacobs is not back, they do not have another credible running threat on that team with Zamir White and Amir Abdullah. The Raiders will be in trouble if they go into this season without Josh Jacobs. Now, Josh Jacobs is getting drafted on average 16th overall, which puts him right in the second round there, right after Devonta Adams. So you're probably, out of those
stack them.
Out of those 2 players, I would want Devonta Adams if it came down to me. But the other thing with Devonta is at the same point that you're drafting Devonta, you have the chance to get Amon-Ra St. Brown, you have the chance to get Garrett Wilson, you have the chance to get A.J. Brown, you have the chance to get another elite running back. There's a lot of choices that you can make, and you have to determine which player has a higher upside, because Devonta's upside is one of the things where, he seems to be safe. But with Jimmy G and the fluctuation with Josh Jacobs, we're not sure where that's going to be. But his pure talent, I mean, even in his worst season, played 14 games, and this is outside of his first 2 seasons, so not counting 2014, not counting 2015. In 2017, he played 14 games, 74 receptions, 885 yards, 10 touchdowns. In 2019,
it's the most picky quarterback of all time.
In 2019, 1,295 yards, 100 receptions, 7 touchdowns. So you know what you're getting with Devonta Adams, but you don't know what the Raiders are going to do.
Well, here,
that's the primary problem with taking Adams. Hey,
this is my thing with Adams, and this is all about perception, because I'm going to draw a comparison here that's pretty apt, and especially in the fantasy world. The other guy that got more than 180 targets is Hill. Hill has, just as an incompetent quarterback, but a way better PR policy down in Miami than in Vegas, because people believe Miami has a chance. At the end of the day, I think both of them should be devalued over those players we were saying. And Josh Jacobs, do you want to have a lead running back on a team that's never going to be winning, and that's probably going to be looking at trading away both of these assets come the trade deadline? That's why I started with their introductory record. It is not inconceivable that these guys lose at Denver week 1, lose at Buffalo, lose to the Steelers, lose to the Chargers, Packers, and at the Patriots. That is not inconceivable. Their 3 home games, the Steelers travel better than anyone else in the NFL, except for maybe the Packers, who's their second home game, and the Patriots love filling up other places' stadiums as well. The Raiders faithful could be looking at another wasted season, and regardless of which one of these two talents we talk about, when it comes time for your playoffs, the best thing for either of them is to be on another team.
And when we see the Raiders here, and when we're thinking about, okay, they're going to be down a lot potentially in certain games, and yeah, Adams could get locked up, but as we said, the talent is there. If I were to go into this season with Barkley as my first overall pick and Adams as my second overall pick,
ecstatic.
I actually wouldn't be very upset by that at all.
Yeah.
And it's just what is going to happen in Oakland is going to drive Adams. Oakland was competitive in certain games, or not
Vegas. Yeah.
Vegas was competitive in certain games last year. And like you saw, 1,500 yards, 14 touchdowns. He's a target in the red zone if they decide that they want to get there. He's a target downfield. He's a target in intermediate routes. There's a very good chance that Devonta Adams could finish the season as a wide receiver 1 overall, but the pieces have to be there all together. And we need a healthy Jimmy G for that to happen. We need a healthy and on the team Josh Jacobs for that to happen. And if those two pieces are there, Adams has the chance to be the number 1 overall wide receiver.
He does.
Based off of pure talent and statistical, going back in history here. If it's not, I see him settling into that range, like I said, of between 1,300 to 1,500 yards and between 7 to 10 touchdowns, somewhere in there. And you're not going to be mad at that. You really can't be mad at that as your second overall pick. It's just that will Amon-Ra St. Brown provide more value? Will Garrett Wilson provide more value?
Well, I know Devonta Adams is more talented, and when we look at those quarterbacks, Jimmy ain't really that far different from Goff. And who knows what Rodgers is going to show up. So I do believe Adams is a very worthwhile person. My fear with the Raiders is if they get to this horrendous start, 0-6, 1-5, when they know their coach is getting fired, does they revert to the typical Raider way and just throwing it in, folding the towel? Does this become Randy Moss wasted 2 years in Oakland? Is that what's going to happen to Devonta Adams? It's obviously great to score touchdowns in garbage time. People have won championships on that, and Devonta Adams is capable. But when we look at this team overall, they're the only two people worth considering. I don't think Jacoby Myers is even, if he was on any other team, would be even considered close to a number 2 receiver based upon his talent level. Renfro is the same deal, and they don't have a tight end. So aside from
they do have a rookie, but when you say that, Jacoby Myers in the 13th, 14th round, and Renfro basically as a free lottery pick.
Yeah,
you're not. If you take them, you're not losing anything. If you're drafting Myers, your decision is between Myers and Sky Moore. I'd rather have Sky Moore
all day.
And if you're drafting Renfro, he's free. And let me write that down. He's free. And so if you're taking a chance, yes, he has limited upside, but we have been burned by Renfro in the past. And we've been burned,
We've been burned when he was a slot machine in PPR leagues. Exactly. You've never been burned by him in a standard league because anytime you're in the red zone, Hunter Renfro is the last option you're throwing the ball to. He's like 5'1".
He is.
He's little shifty, but you're throwing the ball. You're either handing it off to Jacobs or you're throwing it to Adams.
This is why I say that he's a good type of free here, is that wide receiver 71 overall. If something were to happen with Jacobs and say he's not playing, well, there's going to need to be a lot of earlier releases from Jimmy G. He's going to need to get the ball out a little bit faster. Myers will compete with Renfro for targets there, but Myers is going to cost you a lot more. Renfro will not. And yes, Renfro probably will not scratch your lineup, but
then what's the point?
As a bye week guy to fill in, and say he picks up, and somebody sees that and maybe 2 or 3 good weeks and you're still not going to start him in your lineup, he could be a piece that you could trade, and it's free.
See, I honestly don't think Renfro will ever have a chance to get above streaming tight end level. I don't think there's going to be weeks where Renfro is a clear and obvious better selection than like an Ogunjobi in Cleveland. Like any of that tier 12 through 18 tight ends. I don't see a week where I'd not rather have one of them than Renfro at any point, unless he becomes the number one due to injuries and or trades.
And that's
that's the lottery pick you're playing. That's
right.
the lottery pick you're playing.
Once you get past your starting roster, and once you get past maybe a couple of bench spots, and you're floating around and who to pick in the last 3 rounds, and Jonathan Mingo already went, and Rishi Rice already went, and Roshan Johnson already went, guys that have a lot of upside, and you're saying, well, what's a name that I've seen in the past that could potentially perform?
Renfro is it.
Renfro has been there. He was out all last season, and I just want to get a look at a stat real quick for you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to pause that. It's the Raiders. I want player stats, and I want receiving stats.
We're going to wrap this one up quick.
Yeah.
It's starting to go long.
What?
It's starting to go long. Long ball. It's my water.
Okay. So when you look at Renfro, in 2021, he had 111 receptions for 9 touchdowns over 1,000 yards.
Okay.
2020, 56 receptions, 656 yards. So he wasn't used as much there.
Mm-mm.
And then in 2019, 605 for 4 touchdowns. So he's not been in the league very long. He was targeted 139 times in 2021, played in 10 games last year, and was still targeted 50 times and caught 36 balls. And so health was a big concern for him last year. If he can come back and play the 2021 way, we're not too far off from that. And personally, that would be a guy that I would definitely take a chance on later on. You, not so much, but
no. But I see. That's certainly true. There are worse people out there. I just, I don't get over the fact that when some teams get into an abysmal situation, some of them are able to get out of the problem, and some embrace that they're in a black hole and will be forever.